Today's full card comes from the Zombie Tarot by illustrators Paul Kepple and Ralph Geroni. You'll see that it's quite traditional Rider-Waite-Smith influence, and we recognise some of the normal Fool attributes or characteristics in the card. First of all, he's a well-dressed, well-presented Fool. He's all decorated and ready to head out in his best clothing. He has provisions there that he's prepared beforehand for his trip in his picnic basket. He has flowers that are appropriate for this occasion, and he has a wreath. He has an enthusiastic outlook. He's really excited to be heading out into whatever adventure he's planning to take himself on. He has his spirit companion back here. It's a vulture. Now, the vultures turn up quite regularly in tarot decks, particularly older ones. They tend to symbolise purity and transformation, so in this setting that's probably appropriate because they have to do with turning death into life. So there's a hint as to where we might be going in a rabbit hole with this exploration. In this one we also see that there's some choice here. There's two paths that he could go down, and it's always good to pay attention to things like that when you're exploring a full card. Is he locked into what he's doing, or does he have some sort of free will or some alternative that he could go down? So that's worth looking at. So what's different about this one that makes it different from the other full cards that we've looked at already? One is that there's an awful lot of detail in this one. That's quite unusual, and this amount of background context gives us a huge amount of scope to go exploring. It looks like it might just be superfluous detail. There's a cemetery, there's lots of tombstones and the sorts of things that you would see in a cemetery, and so it's irrelevant how many tombstones are there. But I think not. I think it just shows the amount of death that's there and balance that off against the amount of life and energy that he's showing. What also is different is that there's no interaction between him and his spirit animal, which is normal. Normally there's a little dog or something who's actually impacting on him in some way, trying to get his attention or just being part of the adventure. But in this case, the vulture's sitting back in the background. It's almost turned away from him, as if it's just let him go without interfering, which is unusual because it's perhaps just allowing him to go off into whatever adventure, and it's either waiting for what happens next, or it's just simply just letting it go, whatever, and just not interfering, being silent. And at this point it's interesting to see where the vulture's placed itself, sitting on someone else's memorial, and there's writing on the memorial where there isn't writing on any of the other tombstones that we see, just this one. And the only word that we can pick out from that is the word learned or learned. For a while I thought it might have been an L plate with earned underneath and looked at that, but I think in this case it's the word learned. So it suggests perhaps that the vulture's saying that the fool hasn't learned anything, or that the person who died here learned but too late, and there's a warning there for the fool. But anyway, the spirit is not interfering. He's just going to allow it to happen. So for there, I moved into intentions. What's different in the intentions of the different characters in here? You have the intention, obviously, of the fool. He's going somewhere. So perhaps the way that he's all dressed up, and the way he's looking too. He's moving forward, not taking either path at this point. He's moving forward, his eyes are forward, and they're at head height. So perhaps his intention is to take this memorial and go and meet some of his friends or his family, and they're going to celebrate, say, some old relative who died some time back, and he's not grieving. You can see that he's not grieving or sad in any way. So he's going off to meet his family. They're going to lay the wreath, and then they're heading off for a picnic together, and that's a really nice intention. Or it could be that he has an anniversary where every year he takes his picnic basket and goes to the cemetery and sits on the grave of his loved one, has a picnic, chats with to the grave, to his loved one, and then he goes home. So in either case, time has played a part in that, and he is still no longer grieving. So that may be his intention. The intention may be for the spirit animal, the vulture, just to sit and wait. It may be that he's waiting for the fool to realise that he's walking into some danger here, or that he needs to learn, and if the fool dies, well, maybe the vulture can get some lunch then. Perhaps that's his intention. So what's the intention of the zombies? Well, we can't tell, but when I looked at this card, I thought, well, perhaps because they have no names or anything written on their gravestones, perhaps they're just throwing up their hands saying, pick me, wanting him to throw his wreath onto them and to show them some kind of remembrance as well. So there's intentions, and you don't often see that hinted at in any full card. So this card took me and Dr. T down a very long series of rabbit holes. Mostly the theme seemed to settle for us. The idea was settling on the concept of past, present and future in this card. It became quite muddly at times because it wasn't always clear who was representing past, present or future. And so for clarity, I think we've just condensed it down to as simple a possible perspective for this video. But there are other ways of looking at it, and if you're interested, I really suggest you have a good look and see if you can spot something different that we haven't seen. Ultimately, we've placed the vulture here in the present along with the fool, and so are the zombie hands. So everything's now in this present moment. It's happening now. But the past, present and future are represented. The past is represented by the monument. What has been learned, whatever it was that that person learned in the past. And it shows us for the fool that the past what you learn in the past just gets buried with you unless you actually apply it or bring it forward. Otherwise there's no point. It just gets buried like anything that these people had learned in their lifetimes. It just gets buried and there's no point to it going ahead. But in this case, what this one learned in the past, the vulture is sitting there ready for what happens to the fool. So there's the past. The present is very much the fool in this moment. He's going off, he's got his sights set on where he's going and what he wants to do. So he's very, very present. Now that puts the future here. So who is the future? Well, I think that the zombies aren't the future per se. The zombies are the change agents. They're an indication that something has changed. It's not the fool, and it's not the expected past, the one that we have all relied on and that the dead stay buried, but that it's changed. The future is changing. And perhaps that's well supported by the headstones, tabula rasa. There's nothing written on them. The future hasn't been written yet. So we don't know for sure what's going to happen with the fool. We can imagine what will happen when the rest of the zombies come out of the ground. He's not looking forward to a very bright future, and he was perhaps a little unprepared for the risk, and he perhaps should have paid a bit more attention to what was happening around him, because he's in great danger here. But the future's not written. The only thing that we know is what we can look back at the past and see patterns, see what we know and how the dead bring forward learning, but they themselves stay in the past. Only those who are present now can draw from the past and bring it forward into our future to make something out of it, to sustain us going forward. But we have to pay attention to change, because if we continue to over and over again follow old routines and social norms, doing the same thing every year without thinking over and over again, then we are not moving forward, and time moves forward, society moves forward, and the future brings with it all kinds of new things. If we're not paying attention, they'll come up to bite us. So that's where we went to with this full card. If you enjoyed this video, then please like and subscribe on the channel, and leave a comment, because there's nothing as exciting as fresh brains. Thank you.